My parents gave my spoiled sister an apartment and invited me to dinner at the new apartment to celebrate her achievement. When I arrived, during dinner, my father said, "You're the loser of the family. You've never achieved anything and never will." Everyone laughed. My mother and sister agreed, saying that my destiny was to earn a low salary and live in a rental property. It was then that I revealed that the construction company that had built the building where they bought my sister's apartment was mine. All I heard was my father yelling, "Hello, welcome to this channel. Like and subscribe, enjoy, and turn on notifications. Comment below which city you're watching from. I'd love to hear it, and please leave a heart in your comment. Since I was little, I've learned to be content with little." While my younger sister was the center of attention, the beloved, dreamed of daughter, I was the one who had to understand, give in, and keep quiet. When I got a new blouse, she got three. If I got a good grade, it was my duty. If she got an average grade, it was cause for celebration. I grew up stifling tears, smiling politely, trying to excel in my studies because I was told that was my only chance to be worth something. But time passed. I grew up. I went to school alone, fought for every achievement, lived what many would call a hard life, while my sister always had everything handed to her. My parents said she was more sensitive, more delicate, and needed support. This support always came in the form of money, gifts, comfort, and privileges. Me, I received harsh words and demands. I often wondered if I really had the same parents. For years, I kept my distance, just enough to avoid further harm. I worked in silence without needing to advertise my achievements. And there were many. I gave up leisure, free time, and relationships to forge my own path, with hands calloused from effort and a mind firm in purpose. I saved money, studied the market, and knocked on doors until I got my first opportunity at a construction company. The rest was hard work and vision. Little by little, I climbed the ladder, without fanfare. But even from a distance, I was still part of the family, or at least that's what they said when they needed me. And then the invitation came. A special dinner, as my mother called it. A dinner at my sister's new apartment. According to them, it was an achievement for her, a beautiful milestone being overcome. I felt uncomfortable, as always. But I accepted. Maybe because I wanted to be part of it, because I wanted to try again, or maybe because I just didn't want to give them the pleasure of saying I'd walked away for good. When I got to the apartment, I felt a strange tightness in my chest. It was a beautiful place, well located, with modern finishes. But there was something about the way my mother smiled and my sister strutted around the property that made me realize this dinner wasn't a celebration. It was a show-off. A provocation disguised as a get-together. We sat at the table. Empty laughter, comments laden with innuendo, glances up and down. Until, halfway through dinner, my father dropped his cutlery and said, "You're the loser of the family. You've never achieved anything and you never will." The silence at the table was filled with laughter. They laughed at me. My mother nodded, as if confirming a prophecy. My sister, with a smirk, said, "Thank goodness Mom and Dad were able to give me a real home." You can't live on rent and low wages your whole life, right? At that moment, something inside me clicked. It wasn't anger, it was enough. A silent but definitive enough. And then, with a calm voice, I held the glass, looked my father in the eye and said, "I'm glad you're enjoying the apartment. The construction company that built this building is mine." The silence that followed was more deafening than any scream, but it came anyway. My father screamed. My mother dropped the glass. My sister turned pale, and it was at that moment that I realized my family's story ended there. From that dinner on, everything would change. The silence that fell over the table was disconcerting. My father, flushed with anger, slammed his palm down on the table, knocking over the cutlery. My mother's eyes widened, trying to figure out if this was a joke. And my sister, for a moment, seemed frozen, as if she couldn't process the information. "What are you talking about?" my father asked, his voice trembling, trying to contain his outrage. "What did I say?" I own the construction company responsible for this building. I've had a majority stake in it for almost 2 years. My sister was the first to recover from the shock. You, owner of a construction company, she gave a short, mocking laugh. She must be confusing it with something. What do you do for a living? Assistant, I sighed. I expected the disbelief. They always saw me as inferior. They never believed in my potential. Maybe because if they recognized who I really was, they'd have to deal with the guilt of everything they'd done. It's been a while since I've been employed by anyone. I have my own CNPJ, Brazilian taxpayer registry, managed 2 real estate companies, and a year and a half ago, I took over the construction company that built this building. My mother let out a small groan, as if it were a nightmare. My father stood up, staggering with rage. He pointed his finger at me like he used to when I was a teenager, accusing me of whatever my sister had done. You're lying. You've always been a failure. You've always been complaining, wanting to be better than your sister. Making up stories, playing the victim. You think you're going to fool us with this act now? It was always like that. When I kept quiet, I was weak. When I spoke, I was arrogant. When I walked away, I was indignant. But in that moment, I didn't need their approval. I'd already won, even if they hadn't realized it yet. I pulled out my phone and swiped a few photos across the screen. I showed them behind-the-scenes footage of the construction, meetings with investors, and key handovers with other building owners. And finally, the photo that would leave no doubt. Me next to the engineer in charge, with a blueprint open on the table, my company badge displayed. I don't need to prove anything. I just want them to know. I just wanted to see your faces when you found out that the loser built the roof you call home. My sister narrowed her eyes, still in shock. My mother was silent, but her look was one of despair. What surprised me was my father's reaction. He didn't say anything. He just walked to the window and stood with his back to it, taking a deep breath. When he turned around, his eyes were red, but not from shame, from hatred. Are you threatening us? No. I'm just laying my cards on the table. This apartment, even though it's in your favorite daughter's name, was built with the decisions of the daughter you despised. My sister stood up, packing around the apartment. She muttered things like, "This doesn't make sense. She's lying. This can't be happening." It was as if her world had collapsed with a single sentence of mine. For the first time, she wasn't the center. For the first time, she depended on me. My mother tried to soften the situation. "Daughter, if all this is true, why didn't you ever tell us? We could have helped." I smiled. A bitter, tired, real smile. Will it help? You've left me alone since I learned to walk. You never heard a single, "Mom, Dad, I'm tired." All you could say was, "Do more." You molded me to be independent, and now that I am, you want credit. That night was just beginning, but the foundation of our family was already crumbling. They didn't know it, but that dinner had become the last encounter between the disowned daughter and the family that had always made her feel inferior. In that moment, all that remained was truth. And it was just beginning to hurt. The atmosphere in the apartment was one of veiled war. No words spoken after the revelation sounded natural. Everything was tense, meticulously calculated to hide each person's internal collapse. My sister, restless, ran her hands through her hair every 2 minutes, trying to understand when life had turned upside down. My mother, on the other hand, tried to play it cool, but her trembling mouth gave it away. And my father, oh, he just looked at me now with silent resentment, as if swallowing his own humiliation. "Does this change anything?" he said, breaking the silence. "It changes everything, Dad. The way you saw me, the way you treated me. You always made a point of reminding me that I was less than, that I would never be enough. And now that you know I built this, well, maybe now you understand that I wasn't the one who was lacking. You're the ones who never looked up. We only wanted the best for you," my mother replied, trying to sound sincere, but her nervousness betrayed her fragility. "No. You wanted the best for her. I was just the one who learned to fend for myself because I had no choice." My sister snorted loudly. "Look, you're exaggerating. You've always been dramatic. Okay, you have this construction company, congratulations. But that doesn't give you the right to come here and rub it in our faces. This apartment is mine. It's in my name. It was bought with our parents' money. Period. Are you sure about that? Of course I am. It's in the contract, registered and everything. She laughed sarcastically. And before you start any theories, there's no clause that gives you any power here. I crossed my arms, maintaining the calm she was clearly losing. I read the contract, and technically, you purchased a unit through direct financing from the developer. In other words, the property hasn't been paid off yet. This means that, legally, the property still belongs to the company, my company, and at any time, I can review contracts, suspend agreements, or even repossess the property if certain clauses have been violated. And do you know what violates the terms? Purchase statements using third parties, lack of proven income, and unusual financial transactions made by people not mentioned in the original contract. My sister's expression paled as if the ground had dropped out from under her feet. Are you saying you can take the apartment? I'm saying I can reevaluate the agreement. And if I decide to go down that path, you will be notified. But I didn't come here for revenge. I came here out of respect. That you never gave me. My mother, for the first time, seemed to truly feel the blow. Her eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. I knew it was too late for reconciliation speeches. My father, on the other hand, stood firm, as if he wanted to win the fight he'd already lost in the facts. You're not going to do that. That would be cruel. Destroying the life of your sister, your mother, your own family. They destroyed mine, father. And you stood by them. When I spent the night crying in my room because you laughed at my clothes, my hair, my dreams, no one cared. Now that I'm someone, do you care? My sister approached, a mix of desperation and barely concealed arrogance. You want money, is that it? Are you taking revenge because you never had anything? I don't want money, I have more than I need. I just want you to recognize who I am. And stop acting like I'm disposable, because I'm not. Dinner had been served, but no one touched the food. The smell of expensive pasta mingled with the bitter truth. I was tired of pretending everything was okay. That family was a bond, not a chain. And in that moment, for the first time, I was saying out loud what I'd been holding back for years. The truth is, sister, you've always had it all without effort. And when I showed up with something you couldn't get from our parents, you freaked out. Because you don't know how to conquer. You only know how to receive. And now, perhaps for the first time, you're discovering what it means to live under the threat of losing something you believe is yours. She didn't answer, she just looked away. I looked at the door. I knew it was time to go. I had already said what I needed to say. I had already been heard. The impact was made. But before I left one last sentence hanging in the air. You always diminished me so she would feel big. But the world out there doesn't work that way. And now that you know who I am, think twice before treating me like a loser again. I left without looking back. But the silence I left behind in that apartment was worth more than any gift or recognition. The game had changed. And the key player in the family was now me. That night, as I walked home, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time, relief. It wasn't about revenge, it was about freedom. For the first time, I had said what had been bottled up inside me for years. And more than that, I spoke confidently, without shouting, without begging to be heard. They listened because they had no other choice. The next morning, the silence continued. No calls, no messages, no public or private reaction. I knew it wouldn't last. When the mask falls, the impact is too great to ignore. Early that afternoon, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Her voice was filled with false serenity. Daughter, we're trying to talk here at home. Can we get together tonight, just the family? Just like before, the just like before dried up. Before what? Before they ignored me, before they devalued me. But something told me it was time to hear what they had to say. And maybe, just maybe, finish what started at that dinner. I arrived at my parents' house early in the evening. The gate was ajar, as if it had been waiting for me. Upon entering, my sister was the first to greet me, with a forced smile on her face. It was obvious they were trying to contain a crisis, but the nervousness was visible even in the way she held her glass of water. My father was in the living room, sitting like a king on a shaky throne. Seeing me, he stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "Let's not pretend everything's fine, but we need to find a way." I crossed my arms, waiting. My mother quickly chimed in. "Your sister was shaken by the way you spoke. She feels like you're trying to humiliate her." I rolled my eyes. It was always like this. I could be despised, belittled, ridiculed, but all I had to do was react, and I'd become the villain. I'm not trying to humiliate anyone. But for the first time in my life, I'm demanding respect. It's uncomfortable, I know, but it's necessary. My sister stepped forward. "Okay, you have your own company, congratulations. But the apartment is mine, it was given to me. Just because your construction company built the building doesn't mean you're in charge." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Let's be clear, the apartment is still financed, and you didn't go through the developer's credit analysis. You only got approved because I personally brokered the process, without your knowledge. I released this contract on impulse, on emotion, but if I wanted to, I would have vetoed it, and I can still cancel it if necessary." My sister's face paled. She knew I was serious. "You wouldn't do that." She screamed, "You're the cold sister, but you're not cruel. I don't want to do this. But I want to make it clear that I'm no longer the one you used to laugh at or ignore. If my sister has a roof over her head today, it's thanks to me." My father stood up again, walking slowly toward me. "So tell me what you want, my daughter. Money, an apology. A share of the apartment. Speak. I don't want the apartment, I don't want money. What I want, you may not be able to give. I want recognition. I want to hear from your mouths that you wronged me. That they misjudged me, that they belittled me for years, and that they regret it." Silence fell like a blow to the room. It was easy to transfer money, sign papers. What was difficult was looking someone in the eye and admitting they'd failed. My mother lowered her head. She knew, deep down she knew. She began. "I was unfair to you. I felt I needed to make up for everything your sister couldn't stand. I thought you were stronger, more capable. That's why I never cared for you so much." Her confession caught me off guard. It was confusing, but sincere. She thought sparing me the pampering was a way to toughen me up. And perhaps, in a twisted way, it really was. "And you, Dad?" He was silent for a long time. He looked at me as if trying to understand when his invisible daughter became a businesswoman. "I don't know how you did it," he said finally. "But you did, and even with all my resistance, I have to admit you surprised me." Maybe it's time for me to shut up. It was the closest thing to an apology I would get from him. My sister, however, said nothing. She didn't apologize, she just turned and went to her room, slamming the door. "She'll take her time," my mother said. "She's always lived under our rug. Seeing you grow up so much must be painful for her." I didn't answer. I just walked to the door. Before I left, I looked at them both and said, "I don't want revenge. I just want to be treated like a daughter, not a family employee. Think about it." And then I closed the door behind me. I knew this conversation would be the beginning of a slow, perhaps incomplete process. But the seed had been planted. For the first time, they had listened to me, and for the first time, I was willing to see how far this change could go. The following days were calmer than I'd imagined. My parents didn't come looking for me again, nor did my sister. The silence, this time, wasn't contempt, it was discomfort. For the first time, they were coming to terms with what they'd always denied. I'd grown up without them, and yet I'd grown more than they'd imagined. However, this calm wouldn't last. On the fourth day after that conversation at their house, I received a notification in my company email. It was a formal objection from my sister, alleging abuse of power and the use of my position as a partner in the construction company for personal intimidation. She claimed the property was a family gift, and that I, driven by long-standing jealousy and deep-seated resentment, wanted to sabotage her achievement. I remained silent for a while, reading and rereading the document. My lawyer, Ricardo, was as surprised as I was. She wants to expose you, and he said so, not just in court but in public image. He knows you have a name in the market and wants to hit you where it's most difficult. It was absurd, but it was typical of my sister. He wouldn't accept losing, much less losing to me. We'll respond to everything within the law, he told Ricardo. I don't want to fuel scandals. I just want to point out who's trying to use the system for revenge. But deep down, I felt like this wasn't just about the apartment. It was about the entire life she'd spent being spared from consequences. And now, for the first time, I was feeling the weight of reality. Late that afternoon, I was surprised by a call from my mother. Her voice was strained, muffled. Your sister is freaking out. She's saying she's going to call the press, that she's going to expose you as someone who exploits her parents, who stole her rights. She's out of control. I sighed, exhausted. I never meant to get to this point, Mom. She's going too far. I know, she responded, but she won't stop until you do what she wants. And what does she want? For you to declare, in writing, that you never intended to interfere with the property. Who acknowledges that the apartment was a legitimate donation from her parents? I let out a short laugh, like someone who's heard it all. A donation made with the effort of a lifetime that you've always ignored. They want recognition of the donation, but they don't want to acknowledge the person who built the building she stands on. Please, my mother whispered, almost crying. I just want peace between you. Then talk to her, not me. Peace doesn't depend on me. I hung up. I stood in the living room, staring at the building's floor plan on one of my office walls. So many sleepless nights, so many meetings, so much sweat. And now she treated it all as a personal provocation, a battle of egos. It was unfair. The next morning, I was surprised by something even worse. My sister posted a public rant on social media, full of half-truths. She said the family was being torn apart by pride and greed, that some people hide their true selves behind suits and meetings, but don't have the courage to be human at home. She didn't mention me directly, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Within hours, comments began pouring in on the construction company's social media. Some people defended me. Others, clearly her friends, began to attack me. They said I was always envious, cold, and that I tried to buy everything, even the affection of my own family. I went to the balcony of my apartment, feeling the cold wind on my face. Down below, hundreds of people hurried along, oblivious to my pain, and it was at that moment that doubt struck me. Was this fight still worth it? Should I press on with my heart or give in once more? I tapped my phone and typed a message to Ricardo, prepare an official statement. I want to make it clear that I'm not contesting ownership of the apartment, but I demand a public retraction for the false accusations that are circulating. He responded almost immediately, are you sure about that? He's giving up a powerful opposition. I am, but only because I want truth to prevail, not chaos. I sent the message and put my phone away. If my sister thought I would give up out of fear, she was wrong. I was simply choosing to win in a different way, not through destruction, but through determination. The next day, I posted a short, straightforward video, recounting my journey, showing documents, and concluding by saying that what drove me wasn't revenge, but justice. I fought for every space I conquered, and I never had to step on anyone. I hope my family will one day understand that love isn't built on imposition. The video went viral. I received messages from people saying they'd experienced similar stories. Some were even from family members, apologizing for believing distorted versions. But that same night, while I was organizing my paperwork for a company event, there was a knock on the door. It was my sister. Alone, puffy-eyed, without any arrogance. No sarcastic smile. We need to talk. And in that moment, I realized the final chapter still had something to reveal. And what came next would change everything. My sister stood at my door like someone carrying the world on her shoulders. There was no trace of her usual arrogance. She was pale, her eyes red, and the tone of her voice when she finally spoke was too fragile to feign any strength. I lost control. I went too far. I motioned for her to come in. For the first time in a long time, she walked through that door without being the favorite daughter or the princess of the family. She sat across from me as her true self, someone who, for the first time, had to deal with the consequences of her choices. "What do you really want?" I asked. "I want everything to go back to the way it was," I smiled. Not with irony but with pain. "It won't come back because that was never right. It was comfortable for you, but it was hell for me." She lowered her head. We were silent for a few minutes until she let go. "My lawyers told me. The judge reviewed your lawyer's evidence and the contract. Since the apartment is in our parents' name, and they don't have the income to maintain the mortgage, the judge authorized the developer to repossess the unit. I'll have to leave the apartment." I closed my eyes for a moment. It was as if the cycle ended there. She would finally have to feel what I'd felt so many times, the ground disappearing beneath her feet. "That's not what makes me happy," I replied honestly. "But maybe now you understand what it's like to fight for something without getting everything handed to you on a silver platter." She cried. For the first time, he cried without an audience, without drama, just shame. And then he told me the rest. The judge also ordered my parents and I to make a public retraction with the same reach as the posts I made. He said that defamation and emotional abuse, even in a family setting, must have consequences. "I have 48 hours to comply." I agreed. My lawyer had told me about the decision, but hearing it from her was different. It was living proof that justice, albeit late, had arrived. The next day, my sister posted a new video. No makeup, no filters. The text was read between pauses and sobs. For years, I repeated behaviors that hurt my sister. When she grew up and became successful, I preferred to attack her rather than acknowledge her strength. I used social media to spread false and unfair stories, and today I recognize my mistake. I was selfish, proud, and cruel. She's not the loser in the family. I'm the one who missed out on the chance to grow up with her. I publicly apologize and promise not to repeat the same mistakes. Minutes later, my parents did the same. It was embarrassing, clearly forced on their part but necessary. The video reached thousands of views. Some people criticized it, others praised it. Me, I remained silent. It wasn't about applause. It was about balance. 3 weeks later, my sister moved out of the apartment. The construction company repossessed the unit without a fuss. None of the neighbors suspected anything. And contrary to what she expected, I didn't leave it on the street. I offered her temporary support, but on one condition: that she find a real job, something she could build with her own efforts. She accepted. My parents, in turn, distanced themselves. Not out of resentment, but out of shame. They began to understand, albeit slowly, that they had raised 2 children under very different burdens. And now they were reaping the fruits of that choice. Over time, the silence between us gave way to maturity. There was no full reconciliation, but there was something more important: respect. Each one in their own space, with their own pain, but with no more wounds being opened. A few months later, during the inauguration of a new project for my company, I looked at the building we had built. It was modern, full of life. And there, in front of journalists and investors, I was invited to say a few words. What brought me here, I said, wasn't just study, work, or courage. It was the choice not to settle for the place they placed me. I was called a loser, insignificant, but I chose to be persistent. Today, I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here because I built everything with my own hands, and no one can take that away from me. They applauded. But what really struck me was a message I received after the event. It was from my sister, and I saw her talk. Now, I understand. And thank you for not letting me sink completely. One day, I hope I can repay you. Maybe she never will. And that's okay. Because my greatest trophy was never the apartment, nor the company. It was, after all, my name being spoken truthfully. No mocking laughter. No comparison. The woman they once called the family loser was now a beacon of victory. And that door, which once knocked silently because it was ignored, now opened for me. Because I learned that those who build with dignity never depend on others' permission to enter. If this story touched your heart in any way, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss future moving stories like this. Now tell me in the comments, would you have done what this brave daughter did? Would you have stood up to your family to defend your dignity, even in the face of so much humiliation? I'd love to hear your opinion. And also tell me which city you're watching this video from so I can drop it in the comments and leave a special heart next to it. Your interaction is crucial and helps me continue bringing you stories that inspire, move, and make you reflect. So share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, whether it's a friend, a family member, or someone who's been through something similar. Thanks for being here. See you next time.